So it's been a week since I first got my M1 Pro MacBook Pro. Yeah, I know. It still sucks saying that because it sounds redundant. But I still love this MacBook. I will say this though, I have found its Achilles heel. Hi, welcome back to The Colorblind Architect Does Archicad. And as you can see, I'm in my, little cave again. And I wanted to give you a little update on how things are going with my new MacBook Pro. Again, it has the M1 Pro chip and 16 gigs of RAM, 16 graphics cores, 10 CPU cores, and 1 terabyte of storage. The reason why I went with that particular build was because that was what was currently available at my local Apple store. And I really wanted to just try this out. I'm planning on returning this and buying the M1 Max, and here's the reason why. So I found the Achilles heel to doing Archicad on these M1 Pro devices. You run out of memory. So I got this particular widget for the menu bar. This one is called Usage. You can find it online. It is not in the Apple Store. However, what it does is it allows you to kind of customize kind of some of the feedback on what information you want to have readily present on your screen. In this case, I have the CPU usage, I've got my network usage, and I've also got my memory usage, and then swap file usage. Now you can see I'm using quite a bit of swap file already. Now, admittedly, I've got 3 or 4 instances of Archicad running. I also have a bunch of browser tabs open. I also have a few other programs running like Mail and some other miscellaneous things like Slack. So yeah, I'm definitely not treading lightly on this. So it's still handling quite well. But what I will say is if you're working heavily in a bigger model on Archicad, the M1 Pro with only the 16 gigs of RAM, it's not going to really cut it. It will do just fine, and as you can see, because of the really high transfer rate on the SSD, the swap file usage is really not that big of a drag, typically. Until yesterday, when I discovered where you can really just crawl this to a halt, and that is if you're doing multiple renderings at once. So I'm going to go back to this little favorite project. It's pretty much done. I've shown it on other videos, and the reason why is because it's already done. You can see it in Salt Lake City if you're driving around, so I'm not worried about showing anything that isn't publicly available. So I want to make sure that the confidentiality of the information that I deal with my clients is held. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just open up the photo rendering settings. And on these settings, one of the interesting things, right after I did my video last week where I compared my Intel MacBook and my new M1 Pro MacBook, the second update to Archicad 25 came out. Now, the second update, the big feature enhancement that they've added is the new center render engine that allows for GPU-enabled rendering right from within Archicad. Now, it's funny because a lot of people think that rendering is 100% CPU, and yeah, traditionally it has been. The newer technology is to move towards using the GPU as well to help augment the renderings. So just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and start a rendering exactly like the 8-minute render that I did of this just last week using this same device, this same exact view, this same exact model, the same exact settings. The only difference this time is this is now the update 2 to Archicad 25 with the new center render GPU enabled render. I believe they're calling it Redshift. And we'll go ahead and let that render in the background while I continue talking. So where I hit the limitation yesterday was I was doing some renderings of some different options, some different viewpoints, and not thinking about it, I orbit in the 3D model of a different project, take a snapshot, put the photo rendering to work, moved on to the next view in 3D, clicked photo render. I had 3 photo renderings going at the same time, and my CPU usage, as you can see, even on just the one, is up near 100%. You got to give it to Archicad. It loves to multi-thread. It loves to actually use the full, might and power of the Macintosh, which is great. But with only 16 gigs of RAM, you can see I'm already, with just this one rendering going, I'm already up at almost 13 gigs of RAM, which that leaves only 3 gigs of RAM for everything else, anything else that might function. And my swap file is over 8 gigabytes in size. That is enormous for a swap file. It shouldn't be that high. And it's because while I'm rendering, the computer's having to really push a lot of stuff out of memory. And when I ran 3 renderings at the same time, what I found was not only did the CPU max out, but apps were just force closing all over the place. And the renderings themselves even force closed. That was kind of problematic. Now, granted, that's not a normal workflow. If you do mostly small projects, this is going to do just fine for you. You're never going to run into any problems. But I also work with a developer. I develop apartment buildings. So I'm going to run into this problem quite often as I'm developing 100, 300 bed apartment buildings. And there's a lot of memory usage in that. One project in particular that has almost 300 units, I'm able to run it on this laptop, but just orbiting around in 3D, stuff is dropping all over. Polygons are dropping all over the place. There's blank areas of the screen, and yeah, sure, it regens within 3 to 5 seconds, which is okay. That's way better. The Intel MacBook Pro could never handle that. I had to use a desktop, but that's still a problem. It's something that, it's the reason why I want to upgrade to the M1 Max with the 64 gigs of RAM, because for my workflow, I need all that power. I need everything, because I'm doing massive projects and I need to work through this stuff fast. So, as you can see, the rendering's almost finished. We're 4 minutes in. Now, this exact same rendering before on the same computer took 8 minutes. I'm currently at about 11%. I think it will finish up pretty soon, but I've more or less gone over what I wanted to talk about, what I wanted to share, largely just to give you a little feedback. So if you are still considering buying one of these new MacBook Pros with the M1 Pro or M1 Max, what I would say is, if you do need the extra power as an architect, if you do need to have the extra RAM, and you can wait 6 to 8 weeks, I would say buy the M1 Max and wait. Don't jump right in just because you might be able to get the M1 Pro right now. In my case, like I said, I just couldn't wait. I needed to try it out. I did. And now I'm like, okay, I'm happy with it, but I I need the M1 Max. And that's what I will be getting in the future once money allows. But in the meantime, thank you for joining me. Hopefully this was helpful, and have a wonderful day. Peace out. Alright, little update. So, finished the rendering, and it was over 8 minutes. But that was because I realized it had stalled at 5 minutes, and the reason was because the screen recording software was still going. Yeah. Apparently, the screen recording software I was using, which is called Record It, it was conflicting with the ability of the rendering engine inside of Archicad to be able to actually finish. Not sure why. Another mystery, right? But hopefully that helps. Anyways, thanks for joining.